Hello and welcome to my body of work first vlog. A little bit late to coming to this. I'm actually working on nearly finished A2, so let me tell you a little bit about what I've done so far. In A1 I was working on myths and legends. If you look in the learning log, you'll see a mind map, or a link to a mind map of all the myths and legends that I've been researching. There was quite a lot of work in that, and it took me quite a long time. It's actually something I started quite a long time before I was even doing this for another reason, but it's carried forward. For the first part, A1, I ended up making 19 concept art pieces, each depicting a different myth or legend in a kind of tableau. Having gone through this and had a conversation with my tutor, was looking for a way to refine it for A2. The way I chose to refine it was to turn it into a graphic novel. The grand plan being to create a graphic novel for each of the myths that I was studying, and have this great big book with all graphic novels in and big grand plan. Not actually terribly practical, as it turns out, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So I created a number of images. I made the first 3 pages, I think, or maybe 4 pages, including a cover page, just to really explore the concept of using a graphic novel to tell these stories. There's a few things I discovered along the way. The first one is it's very different from doing the concept art, because in the concept art you're trying to tell the whole story in one picture. In the graphic novel, you're taking little pieces of it, so it might just be you taking a picture of some eyes to give an expression, or a mouth, or the gesture of a hand or something. There are lots of different styles that are used in various comics in the Marvel and DC world and stuff like that, where perhaps they'll do a larger picture that sets the scene with little insets all the way around it, showing events that happen in that scene. Or moving the story forward. Some of them are very chronological, so you have to read around in a certain way for it to make sense. Others, you can read them in any order, and by the time you get to the end, you get the gist of what the page is trying to tell you. So there are lots of ways of telling stories in comics, I discovered. What I did find was that, firstly, that was very different from doing the concept art, because you're not telling a whole story in one piece, you're just making little tidbits. These pictures, because of the way they're created in DAZ Studio, take an awful long time to render, between 2 and 8 hours for each one to render. I found a graphic novel that actually told the story of Perseus and Andromeda, which was quite an interesting reference to actually compare what I was doing to actually see the way they tackled the story and the way I was tackling it. And basically the first thing I discovered was that I wasn't going into enough detail. So if you look at the way they professionally produce graphic novels, there's a lot more panels and pictures than I was producing to tell each part of the story. They actually will perhaps use several panels to show the movement of a hand from one place to another, and actually have dialogue along the way. And I found that my telling of the story was becoming a little bit trivialised, and the reason it was becoming trivialised is because of the huge amount of time it took to render each of these little pictures, which is not so bad when you're doing a huge tableau and you're not doing so many of them. But in the graphic novel that I found that they'd done, there was 45 pages, each with 5 or 6 images on each one, sometimes more. And that's an awful lot of images to render. I did a quick calculation, and at its very worst, that's like 2,500 hours of rendering just to render the pictures, nothing else. What that does tell me is that this is not a very practical way to deliver my body of work, because it is an enormous amount of work. That doesn't mean I won't do it, and it doesn't mean I won't use that in the future, because it's actually something I'm quite passionate about, but I don't think it's going to be appropriate for my degree submission, which means that I'm probably going to end up going back to doing tableaus or something like that. I haven't quite figured it out, and I think that assignment 3 is where I'm going to have to nail my colours to the mask and actually work out what I'm actually doing to move this all forward. So that's where I am now. I'm about to submit A2 to my tutor. I'm extremely late doing this, and I'll confess the reason for that is I've been completely derailed. In the process of all this, my head's been completely into the whole Greek myths and legends that I've been looking up, working out how to express particular things using these graphical images, and my whole thinking has been around that. Now, obviously, if you're telling a Greek story, you're going to have characters dressed in Greek costumes, which by their nature and because of the heat of the place are actually relatively skimpy. The other thing is that fantasy art tends to be a little bit Amazonian, if you know what I mean. In other words, there are quite a lot of scantily clad females in fantasy artwork, kind of the genre. And so I'm working along those lines because that's what I know, that's what I've read over the years. That's really where my headspace has been, and it's kind of the art I like making as well. This didn't go down well. So when I went to the TV group, my tutor was there, and my tutor seemed to be a tiny bit horrified that I was using the male gaze. And to be honest, she completely derailed me. I don't think she meant to, but it left me... I didn't actually know how to fix what they were saying, or what I was meant to do. Because what everyone was saying, and it's not just a tutor, but it's everybody, what people were saying was confusing to me, in as much as in one breath it was all wrong and I should be looking at it in a modern way so that the heroes were women, or was one suggestion, or I should do something in some way different. Jane kept telling me I need to study the male gaze, and I'm ever so sorry, but I don't understand how it helps. I have looked at the male gaze many times, actually, and I looked at it again after all of this, and it hasn't helped me. I don't really know what to change or what to do. I feel very conflicted because I don't understand what I'm being told to do. So clearly what I did offended them, but there was no helping what I could do that wouldn't offend them. And many of the things that were being said to me weren't what I wanted to do, and they were different. They made the project totally different. I don't know how I feel. I've written a blog post on my site. I don't know how to respond. Studying the male gaze, fair enough. I've done that. I understand it. Do I understand it? I don't know, actually. I do understand it. I understand what they're saying anyway. I don't know how I want to change my art because of it, though. I feel a bit bullied, actually, but I could be wrong. And as I said in my post, I think that the pandemic has a lot to do with it. I'm normally quite a strong person mentally. Not much actually gets to me. But I've been locked up in isolation because I've been shielding for over a year now. And I don't think that helps, because I tend to overanalyse things a bit now and take things a little bit more to heart than I should do and stuff. And I think it's probably a lot to do with it. I've been derailed. I actually stopped dead. I didn't know what to do. I didn't do anything for a while. I just picked it up again, and I'm ploughing forward. My plan is to put together what I've got already, turn that into an A2 submission, because in itself, it's a good bit of research and it's a good outcome. I have some examples of how I can put stuff into a graphic novel. They are inadequate, and they prove that to do it like this, they would need to be much more granular, which would mean an awful lot more pictures going into an awful lot more detail to make it work, because as it is, it doesn't work. It could be made to work, and I could do it really, really well. I just don't have time to. And when I say that, I mean it is a vast piece of work. It actually attracts me to doing it, but probably outside of the degree rather than inside of the degree. In terms of fixing the images, I don't think I ever need to, in terms of the male gaze side of things for the moment, because I'm not going to use them. They just are what they are. Going forward, I'm going to have to think about how I interpret what I do. I'm feeling much more like I need to go back to the tableau and create tableaus that tell each story. So it's one or two or so images that tell the entire story, rather than try and dig in and tell every line of the story graphically, which, as I said, is such a lot of work. Just because it's a lot of work doesn't mean it's not valid to do, but it does mean that sometimes you can't do it for a particular project like this one. I have a limited amount of time. Although I've got my full time for level 3, I will still run out of time if I try to do this, and I've got to get this stuff done relatively quickly. So I'm going to go back to that energy and drive I had when I was doing the concept art, and actually look at refining my choice of myths and legends, creating better pictures than I did before, because that's the point, isn't it, to get better every time, and create some hopefully stunning tableaus that depict these stories, because some of them I really enjoyed doing and some of them turned out well. Actually, my Perseus picture with the Kraken was one of the ones I was particularly pleased with. There's such a lot of movement in that picture. So that's what I'm aiming for, do some of that stuff. I guess I'm going to have to... Well, let's be honest, I've been kind of terrified to talk about the whole male gaze thing and everything, because everyone's so sensitive, and I don't really like talking subjects that cause arguments. I'm not really enjoy that. I don't like political arguments and stuff like that. And I've felt for some months that I couldn't really talk about the whole male gaze thing, because I was going to upset somebody and end up being dragged out into the village square and lynched or whatever, because I'm some horrible misogynist. I'm not, by the way. But there we are. I do enjoy certain types of art. Like I'm a big fan of Boris Vallejo, and that stuff was probably horrific to somebody who doesn't like the male gaze, because it's all scantily clad women and stuff. And I can't help it. I enjoy that sort of work. It's my fantasy upbringing. Every book I ever bought had covers drawn by people like him. He did a lot of the covers of a lot of the science fiction and fantasy books. And so it's something I've always appreciated. I don't make any apologies, and I'm not changing my ways. I like that stuff, and I'm not going to stop liking it. It's where I am. So, don't know where I'm going to go with it when I go forward. I'll have to sit down and talk to Jane. I think I've totally misunderstood her, probably misrepresented her. So I'm going to have a chat with her and see where we are, and see what I need to do to actually move forward. I'm sure she'll help me. And after that, we'll see where we go. Anyway, really weird blog this one, but thanks. I'll talk to you all later. Bye bye.